So if you're looking to move to St. Augustine, you probably have a ton of questions about living here in the area. And after helping over 100 families over the past couple years relocate here to the city of St. Augustine, I've heard about all of them. So what I did today is I put in the top 10 questions that I got from all the people that have looked to relocate here to our area. So whether you're moving from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, California, Texas, or if you're moving within the state, you're moving from South Florida up to the Northeast, you're more than likely going to be able to find some value from this video. So I wanted to make this video as informational as possible. So what I did is front loaded this video with as much information, the most important questions that people have at the very beginning. And then as towards the end, we go towards more of like lifestyle and economic data. So we'll touch on all those things, but the most important questions are going to be in the very beginning. And one of the biggest questions I get is surrounding taxes and property taxes here in the state of Florida, but also here locally in St. Johns County. So just to cover, the state of Florida has no state income tax, so you do have some tax savings on that end. We do also have the homestead exemption. So I actually am working with a client right now where they're moving from Texas because they don't have a similar program where their taxes get capped year over year. We're here in the state of Florida. We have the homestead exemption. It gives you $50,000 off of your taxable value. So your bill does go down slightly, but it also caps you at a 3% raise year over year. Whereas many other states, just like Texas, there isn't that cap. So your taxes can go up as much as your property value goes up, which that could have been a huge problem here in the state of Florida, considering our property value has gone up like 60% across the entire state over the last 5 years. But many homeowners who had their properties homesteaded did not have to worry about that because by the homestead exemption, you can only raise it 3% year over year. So in general, if you're looking at St. Johns County and looking to buy a home here, more than likely your taxes are going to be roughly around 1.4% of purchase price. So if you're buying a $500,000 home here in the area, you can expect your taxes to be around $7,000. Now, there are a whole bunch of different tax districts within St. Johns County. If you're living in downtown St. Augustine, that's going to be one of our more expensive tax districts where it's going to be around 1.9% of your purchase price, so almost 2% of your purchase price. Versus like where I live, and I live in the county here, I'm only a mile from downtown St. Augustine, my taxes are 1.23% of your purchase price. So it can vary, but just to give you an average, I would say about 1.4% is going to give you a good baseline so you can make an estimate. Outside of that, if you are interested in a specific property, St. Johns County does also have the St. Johns County Property Tax Estimator, where you can put in the specific address and it'll pull up the exact tax district. You can put in the value that you might want to offer on the property or what it's listed at, and that'll give you an estimate of what the taxes will be for that property whenever you purchase it. Because when you buy a property, that is a triggering event for taxes to be reassessed. And on top of all that, we could see a major change to all property taxes here in the state of Florida for primary homeowners because Ron DeSantis eliminated it, and apparently it's going on the ballot next year. Now, I don't imagine that this is going to erase property taxes at all because in general here in the state of Florida, you need to have over 60% of the vote in order to make any changes to constitutional amendments of the state of Florida. So a lot of people got to agree on that. And most places it's over 50% because that's a majority. Not here in the state of Florida. So if that passes, they will have to figure out a way to get that tax revenue back because the government's not going to take a haircut like that. Because at the end of the day, that's billions and billions of dollars that the state of Florida isn't collecting anymore. The second question that I get is surrounding insurance. Now, pretty much anytime you turn on the news, you're going to hear some type of story about Florida, the homeowners insurance, insurers pulling out, and all the issues surrounding insurance here in the state of Florida. And that's going to have to deal with hurricanes, which is also another question we have later in the video here. But in general, here in northeastern Florida, our insurance policy is more like the rest of the United States. They say for the average for the state of Florida, you're going to be spending somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000 a year for your homeowner's insurance policy. Here in northeastern Florida, for the majority of policies I see for single family homes that are sitting in flood zone X where you're not required to have flood insurance, they're going to be spending somewhere between $100 to $200 a month on their homeowner's insurance policy. So in reality, they're going to be around $2,500 a year, which is not too much different from the rest of the country. If you're buying a new construction home because they're built to the latest engineering standards and the latest Florida building code, you can see your homeowner's insurance be $70 to $100 a month. I bought a new construction home a mile from downtown St. Augustine, which floods all the time. I'm in an area that does not flood. For me to get homeowners insurance, I bought a $300,000 house. It would have cost me $75 a month. It's a new construction home, so that's why it was so cheap. But because I have two pit bulls, the guy who writes my policy is also one of my friends. He was like, listen, just in case you want to have them on there, it's going to cost you an extra $30 a month. You may as well throw that on there. So our insurance is $110 a month. When you put that up over the year, that's only like $1,200 a year for homeowners insurance. If I wanted to get flood insurance, which we did, because honestly it was so cheap, why not? Just in case, you never know, right? The flood insurance policy was $450 for the year. So very affordable. Now, of course, if you're living on the intercoastal, if you're living on the ocean, you're going to have a different set of numbers coming at you. It's probably going to be in the thousands of dollars a year when you're talking about flood insurance. I just saw a house, for a client down there, and we did a flood insurance quote, and it came out to around $5,000 a year for about an 1,800 square foot home in flood zone AE. But in general, most people don't live on the ocean. They don't live on the intercoastal. That's a different level of money. Where most people play, they're probably going to be in flood zone X. So more than likely, you're going to be spending around $2,500 a year on just homeowners insurance alone. And I did a full deep dive on the insurance issue here in Florida. If you want to check out that video, I have that here above. And the third question I get is surrounding hurricanes and flooding. Like, is it a problem here? Is it something that I need to be concerned with when buying a home in the area? And for the most part, like I just said, if you're not on the intercoastal, if you're not on the ocean, you're more than likely not going to have to worry about flood insurance or just hurricanes in general. Now, here in northeastern Florida, we actually are very, very lucky. If you look at hurricane paths over the past 125 years, only 4 hurricanes have made major landfall here in St. Johns County. If you look at the rest of the state of Florida, it hasn't fared so well. We definitely get affected by hurricanes, but we're more safe and insulated from a direct hit. We're getting hit with the bands as they go through the state of Florida. If they come across the west coast, they go across Orlando. Once a hurricane hits land, it tends to lose speed, and then as it heads north, we might get hit with some wind, some rain, but typically we're not getting a direct hit, which I think is also a reflection in our cost of insurance here being much, much cheaper than the rest of the state of Florida. But flooding is definitely a real possibility in many areas across the state of Florida, and St. Augustine is no different. St. Augustine was established in 1565, and they really didn't have stormwater management and drainage on their mind when they were setting up this little city down here. So if you're living in the heart of downtown St. Augustine, if you're living on the intercoast, you're living on the beach, certain areas are going to be more flood prone because at the end of the day, the intercoastal is tidal. So if we have, the high tide and we also have a hurricane coming through, it's potential that a lot of that area is going to be flooded. You can check all of this out using FEMA flood maps. Now I know Zillow and Realtor and all those other platforms have their own flood maps, but at the end of the day, we want to use the FEMA flood map because that is going to be the go-to resource for many people. If it's outside of that flood map, if we don't have an accurate read from that, we always go to the insurance carrier to double check it, because at the end of the day, the cost of insurance is really going to drive how much of a risk flooding is for that area, right? If you have a high risk of flooding, the insurance company is going to charge you more money. If you have a low risk of flooding, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be a lot cheaper. And that's always a good indicator because we know insurance is going to get their money. And the fourth question I get is, what can I actually get for my budget? Now, most people aren't buying the $5-10 million homes on the intercoastal and on the ocean. Most people are living in that $300,000 to $600,000 range here in St. Johns County. And in reality, there is a ton of options available to you. You can buy a new construction townhome here for $220,000, get your interest rate bought down to 2.99, 3.99%, and have all your closing costs paid for. Your payment's going to be around like $1,600-1,700 in that scenario. Or if you want, you can buy a $800 million house in one of these master plan communities and have all the amenities that you could look for, whether that's going to be a 3-story water slide or a zip line. There's all of that available here. So it definitely depends on your budget. People here locally that have lived here think it's very expensive. For the people that are relocating here, I help a ton of people moving from the Northeast, moving from Philadelphia, moving from South Florida, moving from California. When they come here and they see our housing and what you can get for a new construction house, they're blown away, because at the end of the day, like it locally here, the locals are hurting because they're like, man, prices have changed so much. I feel like I kind of got left behind. But if you've lived pretty much anywhere else, you can see like, oh wow, it's still very, very affordable. You can find a new construction single family home in the low 300s here in northeastern Florida, and your payment's probably going to be around $2,000 a month. And there's also a variety of different communities. You're looking for a golf community, you're looking for a beach community, or looking for an intercoastal community, or you're just looking for something with a bunch of amenities. There's a whole bunch of variety here here in St. Johns County, and it just depends what type of lifestyle you're going to be looking for. Maybe you want to golf, maybe you want to be up in Palencia because that's more of a luxury neighborhood with a beautiful golf course in it. Or maybe you're looking to live on the Intercoastal but you don't want to pay an HOA, you might want to look at St. Augustine South. Or maybe you're looking to have affordability and live in a townhome and also like not pay that much money. You're going to look at Entrada and the townhomes that they have there because they're in the low 200s. There's a whole bunch of options here for affordability and also luxury. It just depends what bucket you're in. I do have a list of the top 10 neighborhoods here in St. Johns County. It's a playlist, so it has, there's one video that's a compilation, but there's also 10 videos that break down each neighborhood and goes really a deep dive into all of them. You can check that out above the playlist. The fifth question I get is St. Augustine good for families and retirees? And 100% it covers both ends. It's honestly good for a whole bunch of people. The only thing it's really not for is like that maybe younger 20 years old, like looking for parties and fun and nightlife. St. Johns County, St. Augustine doesn't really have that. And Jacksonville doesn't really have that in general. It's starting to come around, but in general, it doesn't really have that. But if you're looking to retire here, if you're looking to start a family here, if you're looking to raise your family here, St. Johns County has pretty much everything and anything you could want. One of the main things that St. Johns County holds its hat on is going to be its A-rated school district. It normally, for the past 20 years, is trading number 1 and 2 spot of being the number 1 school district in the entire state of Florida, and that's something that St. Johns County does not want to go away at all. And in many of these master plan communities that they're building, not only are they building the schools within the community, but they're also building a 55 plus in the community. So if you're looking to move down here with your family because you want to have a different lifestyle, you want to get your kids in the good school, but you also want your parents to come along with you, I helped a ton of families do that exact same thing, where they buy down here, their parents come down after, and then maybe they buy in the same neighborhood, maybe they want to be 20 minutes away so they're not too close just in case, that's not a phone call away, hey, come down and take care of this. They want to be a little further away. You have options here because not only do we have 55 plus active adult communities, but we also have the master plan communities with the schools in them that allow you to have a different type of lifestyle. So whether if you're looking to retire or you're looking to move here with your family, there's tons of parks, beaches, recreational activities that you can do with the whole family, and it's fun for everyone. And that sounds like a realtor sales pitch, but it's 100% the truth here. Okay, now we're going to shift gears. We're going to take a look at more of like the lifestyle and the living experience here in St. Augustine and the questions surrounding that. The first question I get, and it's just something that comes with living in St. Augustine, is St. Augustine too touristy? And if you're asking someone that's lived here for a long time, right, that's been here 20, 30, 40 years, they're going to tell you like, yeah, it's overdeveloped, it's too touristy, it's not what I remember. But if you've lived anywhere else in the country, you're more than likely going to come down here and be like, this is nothing. I just helped a buyer move from Philadelphia, and if you've ever driven around Philadelphia in 95 and 495 and all that kind of stuff out there, you know that it sometimes can be a mess. You have the New Jersey Turnpike there, you have 95, you have a lot of traffic and congestion in that area. Now, these places are completely different, but when you see people complaining about traffic here, they more than likely aren't aware of like how bad traffic is pretty much everywhere else in the country. So he was like, when people ever complain about that, like I just laughed because they literally have no clue what's going on. But in general, as a local here, you get to know the peaks and valleys of tourist season, whether it's going to be spring break, summer, or the end of the year during our Nights of Lights festival, which is one of the biggest tourist attractions that we have every single year. You know to avoid that area. You know like, hey, this is when it's going to be the busiest. I'm going to have to wait for a restaurant. I'm going to have to wait to park my car. I'm going to have to pay for parking. Whatever that is, you know when the peak seasons of tourism is, and you avoid it, right? So September is locals month because typically that's going to be the slowest month throughout the whole year because we're coming off of summer, kids are getting back to school in August, and then September's dead. So what they said is, hey, we want to get as many locals down here as we can. We're giving them discounts and everything, and we're going to kind of give them their town back for a little bit. Now I will say, if you do live in St. Augustine Beach, or if you want to live in downtown St. Augustine, that is just the cost of living in that area. It's obviously a tourist attraction. You probably came here on vacation and realized that you loved it and wanted to move here by staying in one of those areas. So if you're choosing to live in those areas, then you're going to see more tourism than just everyone else living outside of that. Because really outside of downtown St. Augustine and St. Augustine Beach, you barely notice the tourism. And the next question I get surrounding lifestyle here in St. Augustine is going to be, what's the vibe? Is it chill, laid back, or is it more geared towards a luxury clientele? And there's two stories here, right? Depends where you are here in St. Johns County. If you're up in the northern part of St. Johns County, if you're in like Ponte Vedra Beach, Sawgrass, that's going to be by far the wealthiest area in St. Johns County. So that's definitely more geared towards a luxury clientele. And even now, it seems that downtown St. Augustine and many of the restaurants that are coming in there and opening up shop are geared towards a luxury clientele. But outside of that, it's definitely more of like a laid back vibe. And the way I can say it is like St. Augustine in general is more like Jimmy Buffett, you know, like Margaritaville type of place where it's just fun, laid back. They call it a small fishing town with a drinking problem, I think is the coined phrase here. Whereas if you go up to like the Nocatee or if you go up to the Ponte Vedra Beach, that's definitely going to be more of like a luxurious, you know, polo and khaki type of place. And the last question that we have surrounding lifestyle here in St. Augustine is going to be safety and crime. Is it a safe place to live? Is it a good place for families? Will I feel safe? Does it have a lot of crime? Bundling all of those questions up into one little spot, where essentially to say like there's not one place in St. Johns County where I wouldn't let my grandmother live. Like I feel like it's a very, very safe place to live. I've lived in a ton of different places, some places that if you look at the charts are not doing that well in terms of top cities in the United States. Lived in Brooklyn, New York, lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have tons of friends that live out of Philadelphia and are from like the Kensington Fishtown area. So I'm aware what a bad neighborhood is, right? And I can't identify any place here in St. Johns County that I would consider a bad neighborhood. But there is crime. And for the most part, if you look at a heat map of crime, it's going to be surrounded around the touristy areas. And it's mostly going to be petty theft. Oh, this guy stole my bike, or he stole my cell phone, or a sunglasses, whatever that is. I saw someone post on St. Augustine News the other day, one of the chefs got off of work, he had one of his knife bundles, I'm not sure if you've ever seen those, but they bundle them up, and he was seen on camera where he's sitting at the bench, he leaves it behind, someone takes it. They put it up on St. Augustine News, and I think the person who stole it returned it to that person, or stole it, or picked it up, trying to return it, who knows, right? But that's the type of city that this is, right? Like where people really care about that kind of stuff. There is crime, but if anything, it's pretty petty. It's nothing crazy. And if you're interested, this is a long form podcast. I did interview the St. Johns County Sheriff, Sheriff Hardwick. You can check that video out. I thought it was really good, but it's a long video. Sheriff Hardwick's great. Check it out if you'd like. And for the end of this video, we have two other questions. One's going to be surrounding like the job market here, and one's going to be really surrounding about like what I think locals would do here if they could do it all again, right? So the first one that we want to talk about is like what opportunity is here in St. Johns County. And that's probably the biggest downfall of our area. If you're looking for a job in like the healthcare, the real estate field, the hospitality industry, you're definitely going to be able to find it because that's what our area, that's kind of the backbone of our area here, especially the hospitality industry. But if you're looking outside of that, you're more than likely going to have to commute to Jacksonville for those higher paying jobs. So that's not too bad because in general, Jacksonville is about 30 to 45 minutes from the majority of St. Johns County, just depending on where you live. It could be more, depending where you got to go in Jacksonville, because Jacksonville is huge as well. The main employer here is going to be the government. So if you're working in public education or if you're working at one of the government buildings, that's going to be the top employer throughout all St. Johns County. Also, the sheriff's office is a big employer here in St. Johns County. You can't drive 10 minutes down the road without seeing like 2 or 3 cop cars. And I'm not even joking on that. That's a real thing. But one of the interesting things that I found out just this past year, actually, and I knew that remote work was a big thing here. I just didn't realize how big it was. So a new study came out of our workforce here in St. Johns County, and it showed that 25% of our workforce are actually remote workers, and that's today. I'd imagine like, a couple years ago as we hit the peak of the pandemic, that would have been a very real number, but I would have imagined that it declined pretty significantly when that back to office kind of wave started. But in today's world, a quarter of our population that's working here in St. Johns County works remote. And I think the reason for that is like a lot of people saw it attractive during the pandemic because in reality, Florida was pretty much wide open after like the second month of the pandemic. Like COVID wasn't as big of a deal here as it was in New York City, right? And I know a ton of my friends up there had major problems surrounding the COVID and pandemic and how long that lockdown really lasted for them. We didn't have that here in Florida. So a lot of people moved here. The ability to work remotely was obviously on fire at that point, but it really hasn't changed here where I'm still helping people from YouTube especially that call me, reach out and say, hey, I'm able to work remote. I'm trying to move there because I don't want to live where I'm living anymore. So we have an area that affords that quality of life of what people are looking for, but also like it's affordable for most of these people that are in those positions to work remotely. And the 10th and final question is going to be, Would people who moved here do it again? And what I'm talking about is like I said, I've helped over 100 families move here to this area. And are they happy with it, right? Do they enjoy it? Well, I just had lunch today with one of my past clients. They moved from Beacon, New York. One of my favorite clients that I have. Their son, they've come down here and now visit a whole bunch. Their daughter originally moved down here, which is why they followed, and they love it. They're in St. Augustine South. They're in an intercoastal community. They got a boat. They go out in the water all the time. That's actually, I was talking to him today, and he's like, actually, tomorrow I'm going out in the water because our weather's been so beautiful. So they're loving it. They're loving life. Would they do it again? I'm sure they would do it again. In terms of like most people, when they move here, the lifestyle that you're afforded here in St. Johns County is better than the majority of places that I've lived in my life. And I've lived a whole bunch of different places. I've lived in New York, I've lived in New Jersey, I've lived in Pennsylvania, I've lived in Florida. I have a good idea of like what a good lifestyle is, and I think St. Johns County affords that. And I think that's really the hardest thing for St. Augustine locals to know. A lot of the people that I grew up with, where they're making the money here in St. Johns County, maybe it's $50,000, $60,000 a year, or they're working for the government, or they're working for the hospitality industry here, they feel like they're kind of left out. And it's hard for me to have these conversations with them because there is a lot of anger there. And it's like, hey, all these people are moving here. They're changing the town. They're changing the prices. I can't afford to live here anymore. And now they're choosing to either look at maybe changing what they're looking to buy initially. Maybe they wanted that single family home with the white picket fence, and now they can't afford it anymore. So now they got to go with the townhome for $220,000 without a garage, right? Not ideal for them, but at the end of the day, like every area changes. That's St. Augustine's no different. The rest of the country rapidly changed because of COVID. St. Augustine's no different. So it's a hard pill to swallow. Many of the locals that live here want to continue to live here, but they just need to be calculated on how they move forward. And guys, that is it. Those are the top 10 questions that I've gotten from all the people I've helped relocate here to our area. So if you are looking to relocate to our area and buy a home here in St. Augustine, or if you're living here locally and you want to sell a house or buy a house, reach out to me and my team directly. All we try to do is give you the information so that you can make an educated decision on what you want to do, which is buy, sell, or invest here in Northeastern Florida. Until next time, guys.